The massive alien ship hung in space above Earth like a dark cloud. It was bigger than any human ship ever built. The metal hull was black and covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Jake Morrison stood at the window of Lunar Station Alpha and watched the alien vessel block out the stars. Jake was Earth's chief diplomat. He had spent 20 years learning how to talk to different people and solve problems without fighting. But today felt different. Today, the most powerful empire in the galaxy had come to Earth with demands. The alien ship was called the Sovereign's Wrath. It belonged to something called the Galactic Hegemony. For over 3,000 years, they had ruled most of the galaxy. Every planet, every species, every star system had to obey their rules. If anyone tried to fight back, the hegemony crushed them completely. Commander Lisa Blake walked into the meeting room where Earth's leaders had gathered. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and serious eyes. She had been in the military for 15 years and had never seen anything that scared her. But today even she looked worried. "They're ready to talk," Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. "The alien leader wants to speak with all of Earth's representatives at once." The meeting room was large and white, with a big table in the center. Around the table sat the most important people on Earth. There was General Paul Carter, who commanded all of Earth's military forces. Dr. Helen Rodriguez was there too. She was the smartest scientist on the planet and understood technology better than anyone else. There were also leaders from every major country on Earth, but Jake knew that none of their titles or experience mattered to the aliens. To the hegemony, humans were just another primitive species that needed to learn their place in the galaxy. The alien leader walked into the room and everyone fell silent. He was huge, at least 8 feet tall, with scaly green skin and yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. His name was Warlord Zekatar, and he was one of the most feared beings in the galaxy. He wore black armor that was covered with medals and symbols showing all the worlds he had conquered. Behind him walked 2 smaller aliens carrying strange devices. One device projected images in the air, and the other translated his words into human language. Zekatar looked around the room like a predator studying its prey. "Humans of Earth." His voice came out of the translator as a cold, mechanical sound. "I am Warlord Zekatar of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species has been judged and found lacking in proper respect for your betters." Jake watched as the holographic display showed images of other planets, beautiful worlds with different kinds of alien life. But in every image, the aliens were working in mines or factories, building things for the hegemony. They all looked tired and defeated. "These worlds once thought they were free," Zekatar continued. "They learned better. Now they serve the hegemony with gratitude, for we protect them from the chaos of independence." The warlord's yellow eyes fixed on Jake. "Earth will now join these enlightened worlds. You will provide tribute to show your acceptance of hegemony rule." The holographic display changed to show lists of numbers. Jake felt his blood turn cold as he read them. The hegemony wanted 60% of Earth's population to work as slaves on other worlds. They wanted 90% of all the factories, mines, and farms to produce goods for the empire. They also demanded that Earth give up all weapons and military ships. "In return," Zekatar said, "your species will be allowed to continue existing. The hegemony is generous to those who submit without resistance." General Carter stood up, his face red with anger. "You're talking about enslaving our people? We would never agree to something like that." Zekatar looked at the general like he was an insect. "Your agreement is not required, only your compliance. Every species says the same words when we first arrive. They speak of freedom and dignity and other meaningless concepts. But they all submit in the end because the alternative is complete destruction." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "What if we refuse? What if we fight back?" The warlord made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was cold and cruel. "In 3,000 years of expansion, the hegemony has conquered over 10,000 worlds. No species has ever successfully resisted us. Your technology is primitive. Your ships are few and weak. Your people are soft and undisciplined." Jake studied the alien leader carefully. He had spent years learning to read people, to understand what they really thought behind their words. Zekatar was confident, almost arrogant. He truly believed that humans would surrender just like every other species had done. But the warlord didn't understand humans very well. "You have 30 of your days to prepare your tribute," Zekatar announced. "When I return, Earth will formally surrender to hegemony rule. Your leaders will sign the surrender documents and your people will begin their new lives serving the Empire." The alien leader turned to leave, but Jake stood up. "Warlord Zektar, wait." The huge alien stopped and looked back. "Yes, human diplomat." Jake walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of the warlord. Even though Zektar was much taller and stronger, Jake didn't step back or look away. "I want to make sure I understand your offer correctly," Jake said calmly. "You're asking us to give you most of our people as slaves, most of our production capability, and all of our weapons. And in return, you'll allow some of us to keep living under your rule." "That is correct," Zektar replied. "It is more generous than many species received." Jake nodded slowly. "I see. Well, we'll certainly give your proposal the consideration it deserves." Something in Jake's tone made the warlord's eyes narrow slightly, but after a moment Zektar seemed to decide that the human diplomat was simply being polite. "Wise," the alien said. "Those who accept reality quickly suffer less than those who cling to impossible dreams." As the aliens left the meeting room, the human leaders sat in stunned silence. Finally, General Carter spoke up. "Jake, please tell me you're not seriously considering their demands." Jake Morrison smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been insulted and was planning to do something about it. "Don't worry, General," Jake said quietly. "I'm going to give the hegemony exactly the response they deserve. But first we need to make some preparations." Outside the window, the alien ship waited in the darkness of space, confident in its power. But inside Lunar Station Alpha, the leaders of Earth began planning something the galaxy had never seen before. A war for freedom that would change everything. The emergency meeting started at midnight. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked into the secure command center deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. The room was full of military officers from every country on Earth. Everyone looked tired and worried, but their eyes were sharp and focused. Kate had been in the Navy for 25 years. She had commanded ships in 3 different conflicts and had never lost a battle, but she had never faced anything like this before. The alien empire had thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. Earth had maybe 200 ships that could fight in space, and most of them were designed for exploring, not warfare. General Paul Carter stood at the front of the room next to a huge screen showing the solar system. Red dots marked where hegemony ships were positioned around Earth. There were a lot of red dots. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general said, "we have a problem. In 30 days, the most powerful military force in the galaxy is going to expect us to surrender. If we refuse, they'll try to destroy us." A colonel from the European Space Command raised her hand. "General, what are our chances if we fight them directly?" Carter looked at the screen for a long moment. "Honestly, if we try to fight them the way they expect us to fight, we'll lose in about 6 hours. Their ships are bigger, faster, and have better weapons than anything we've got. So we surrender?" asked Admiral Chen from the Pacific Fleet. "No," Kate Sullivan said firmly. "We don't surrender. But we also don't fight them the way they expect." She walked to the front of the room and touched the screen. The display changed to show historical battles from Earth's past. There were images of ancient warriors fighting against larger armies, smaller navies defeating bigger fleets, and resistance fighters hiding in forests and mountains. "Every military academy teaches the same lesson," Kate continued. "When you're outnumbered and outgunned, you don't fight fair. You use every advantage you can find, and you make the enemy fight on your terms, not theirs." Dr. Helen Rodriguez entered the room carrying a briefcase full of computer tablets. She was excited in the way that scientists get when they discover something new. Helen had been working on experimental technology for the past 10 years, stuff that most people thought was impossible. "I've been running calculations all day," Helen said, setting up her presentation. "The hegemony has conquered thousands of worlds, but they've always faced species that fought like they do. Big fleets meeting in open space, trying to overpower each other with superior firepower. The screen showed a simulation of a typical space battle. Large ships in neat formations firing at each other from long distances until one side was destroyed or retreated. But we don't have to fight that way," Helen continued. "Human military doctrine has always been different. We adapt, we improvise, and we take risks that other species would consider crazy." She touched her tablet and the screen showed something new. Small human ships moving in unpredictable patterns, appearing suddenly in different locations, striking fast and then disappearing before the enemy could respond. Captain Ryan Torres stood up. He was in charge of Earth's experimental ship program. For the past 5 years, he had been working with a small team to develop new types of spacecraft based on human ideas about warfare. Dr. Rodriguez is right, Ryan said. Our ships are smaller than theirs, but they're also more flexible. We've been testing quantum tunneling drives that can move a ship instantly from one place to another. The aliens have never seen anything like it. He showed them videos of test flights, human ships vanishing from sensors and reappearing somewhere completely different. It looked like magic, but it was actually very advanced science. The tunneling drives use a lot of power, Ryan explained. We can only use them for short jumps and not very often. But imagine what happens when an enemy thinks they have you trapped, and suddenly you're behind them shooting at their weak spots. General Carter nodded slowly. Guerrilla warfare in space. Hit-and-run tactics. Make them chase us instead of letting them fight the kind of battle they want. Exactly, Kate said. But there's more. Captain Amy Brooks has been working with our intelligence people to study hegemony military records. Amy, tell them what you found. Captain Brooks was young for her rank, only 32 years old. But she was one of the smartest tactical analysts in Earth's military. She had spent the last few weeks studying every piece of information they could find about how the hegemony fought wars. The hegemony is very good at what they do, Amy began, but they're also predictable. They've been using the same basic strategy for 3,000 years because it always works. They show up with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and then crush any resistance with massive firepower. She pulled up recordings of previous hegemony conquests. The pattern was always the same. A huge alien fleet would arrive at a planet, make demands, and then destroy anyone who fought back using conventional tactics. But here's the thing, Amy continued. They've never faced an opponent that refused to play by the rules. Every species they've conquered tried to match them ship for ship, weapon for weapon. When that didn't work, they surrendered. What makes us different? Asked a colonel from the African Union. We're humans, Kate answered. We're the species that turned wooden sailing ships into weapons of war. We're the people who figured out how to make flying machines fight each other in the sky. We're the species that learned how to fight wars in jungles and deserts and cities and mountains. She pointed to the screen, which now showed images from Earth's military history. Soldiers in camouflage hiding in forests, submarines sneaking under the ocean, fighter planes diving out of the sun to attack enemy bombers. The hegemony thinks space warfare means big ships shooting at each other until someone gives up, Kate said. But space is huge and empty. It's perfect for the kind of warfare humans have always been good at. Surprise attacks, ambushes, psychological warfare, and never giving the enemy a moment's rest. Dr. Rodriguez opened her briefcase and pulled out several devices. They looked like normal computers, but Kate knew they were much more advanced than that. I've also been working on something else, Helen said. Artificial intelligence systems designed specifically for tactical planning. The AI can process information faster than any human brain and come up with battle plans in real time. She activated one of the devices. The screen filled with complex diagrams showing ship movements, weapon trajectories, and probability calculations. The AI was running thousands of different battle scenarios every second, looking for weaknesses in hegemony formations. The aliens have never faced an opponent that could think as fast as their computers, Helen explained. But our AI systems are different. They're not just calculating optimal solutions. They're programmed to think like humans. They look for creative solutions, unexpected tactics, and ways to turn disadvantages into advantages. Captain Torres pulled up another set of data. We've also been modifying our ships. The aliens expect us to fight with the weapons and armor we have now. But in 30 days, our fleet is going to look very different. The screen showed human ships being rebuilt in orbital shipyards. Workers in spacesuits were installing new weapons, better shields, and the quantum tunneling drives that would let them appear anywhere in a battle without warning. Most importantly, Torres continued, we're not trying to build ships that can beat theirs in a fair fight. We're building ships that can make sure the fight is never fair. Admiral Sullivan looked around the room at all the officers and scientists. These were the people who would have to turn their plans into reality. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never been defeated. But they were also human. And humans had always been very good at doing impossible things. Ladies and gentlemen, Kate said, we have 30 days to prepare for the most important battle in human history. The hegemony expects us to surrender or die trying to fight them conventionally. She smiled. and her smile was full of confidence and determination. Let's show them what happens when humans decide to fight back. The 30 days passed quickly. All across Earth, people worked around the clock to prepare for what everyone knew would be the most important moment in human history. Factories that used to make cars and computers now produced weapons and armor for spacecraft. Scientists who had spent their careers studying peaceful topics now focused on ways to destroy alien ships. Jake Morrison spent those weeks doing something that might have seemed strange to outside observers. While everyone else prepared for war, the Diplomat was learning about peace. Not human peace, but the peace that the hegemony had forced on thousands of other worlds. He interviewed refugees who had escaped from conquered planets. He studied historical records of species that had fought the aliens and lost. He learned about the hegemony's methods, their psychology, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Jake discovered something interesting. The hegemony was very good at crushing military resistance, but they had never faced a species that understood psychological warfare. Every other species had either surrendered immediately or fought conventional battles until they were defeated. None of them had ever tried to attack the aliens' confidence and certainty. On the morning of the 30th day, Warlord Zektar returned to Lunar Station Alpha. His ship, the Sovereign's Wrath, was not alone this time. Behind it came a fleet of 50 hegemony warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. The alien commander was taking no chances. He expected to receive Earth's surrender, but he was prepared to enforce it if necessary. Jake Morrison waited for him in the same meeting room where they had first met. But this time things were different. The human diplomat was no longer just representing Earth's government. Behind him stood Admiral Kate Sullivan, General Paul Carter, Dr. Helen Rodriguez, and representatives from every major nation on the planet. More importantly, hidden throughout the solar system, Earth's modified fleet waited for orders. Warlord Zektar entered the room with the same arrogant confidence he had shown 30 days earlier. He looked around at the assembled humans and made that cold sound that passed for laughter among his species. "I trust you have prepared your surrender documents," the alien commander said. "My fleet is ready to begin processing your tribute immediately. The sooner your species accepts its new role, the less painful the transition will be." Jake stood up and walked to the center of the room. He was calm and relaxed, as if he was about to discuss the weather instead of the fate of humanity. This confused Zektar slightly. In his experience, primitive species were either terrified or angry at this point. They begged for mercy or made desperate threats, but the human diplomat seemed almost pleased to see him. "Warlord Zektar," Jake began, "I want to thank you for giving us 30 days to consider your proposal. It was very generous of you, and it gave us time to make some important decisions." "Good," Zektar replied. "Wisdom is recognizing when resistance is futile. Your species will adapt to its new circumstances in time." Jake smiled. It was a warm, friendly smile that somehow made the alien commander feel less confident than he had a moment before. "Oh, we've definitely adapted," Jake said. "In fact, I think we've learned some very valuable lessons from studying your empire's history. Did you know that in 3,000 years of conquest, the hegemony has never faced a species that refused to accept defeat?" Zektar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Because defeat is inevitable when facing superior force. This is a basic law of the universe, is it?" Jake asked. "That's interesting because humans have a different perspective on that. You see, we have a long history of fighting opponents who were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we were, and sometimes we won anyway." The human diplomat walked over to the wall display and activated it. Images appeared showing battles from Earth's history. Small groups of soldiers defeating larger armies, tiny ships sinking massive warships, resistance fighters driving out occupying forces that seemed impossible to beat. "The thing about superior force," Jake continued, "is that it only works if your opponent fights the kind of battle you expect them to fight. But what happens when they refuse to follow the rules?" Zektar was becoming annoyed. "Your primitive history is irrelevant. This is not some local conflict between equally matched opponents. The hegemony commands the resources of 10,000 worlds." "You're absolutely right," Jake agreed. "The hegemony is incredibly powerful. Your ships are bigger than ours. Your weapons are more advanced. Your soldiers are stronger. If we tried to fight you the way you expect, we would lose quickly." The alien commander relaxed slightly. Finally, the human was showing some sense, but Jake wasn't finished. "However, we've decided not to fight you the way you expect. In fact, we've decided not to surrender at all. Instead, we're going to do something that no species in your empire's history has ever done before. And what is that? Zektar asked, though something in the human's tone was making him uncomfortable. Jake's smile became wider and much less friendly. We're going to show the entire galaxy that the hegemony can be beaten. We're going to prove that your empire is not invincible, and we're going to do it in a way that will inspire every enslaved species in the galaxy to rise up and fight for their freedom. The alien commander's confidence finally cracked. You are talking about suicide. Your species will be completely destroyed. Maybe, Jake admitted, but maybe not. You see, Warlord, you've made the same mistake that bullies always make. You've become so used to picking on weaker opponents that you've forgotten how to fight someone who isn't afraid of you. General Carter stepped forward. Warlord Zektar, let me explain our position in terms you might understand better. Humanity formally rejects your demands for tribute. We refuse to surrender our people, our resources, or our freedom. Instead, we declare war on the galactic hegemony. The room fell silent except for the sound of Zektar's breathing, which had become faster and more irregular. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to hegemony demands with a declaration of war. Furthermore, Admiral Sullivan added, we announce our intention to liberate every world under hegemony control. This war will not end until every enslaved species in the galaxy is free. Dr. Rodriguez activated her computer tablet. We're transmitting this declaration on all frequencies throughout the galaxy. Every species under hegemony rule will hear humanity's message. They'll know that someone is finally fighting back. Zektar looked around the room at the calm, determined faces of the humans. These weren't the terrified primitives he had expected to find. These were warriors preparing for battle, and they weren't afraid of the consequences. You have no idea what you are doing, the alien commander said, but his voice had lost its confident tone.
The hegemony will send fleets that will blot out your sun.
We will turn your planet into molten rock. Jake Morrison walked up to the towering alien until he was standing directly in front of him. Even though Zektar was much larger and stronger, the human diplomat looked up at him without fear. Warlord, Jake said quietly, you came here expecting to add another conquered species to your empire. Instead, you found something your people haven't encountered in 3,000 years. You found humans. He stepped back and gestured toward the window where the alien fleet waited in space around Earth. You wanted tribute from humanity, Jake continued. Here's our tribute. We're going to teach the galaxy that freedom is possible. We're going to show every enslaved world that the hegemony can be defeated, and we're going to start that lesson right here, right now, with your fleet. Zektar turned and walked toward the door, but Jake's voice stopped him. Oh, and Warlord, you might want to tell your fleet to be ready for anything. Humans have a reputation for being very creative when it comes to warfare. As the alien commander left the station, Admiral Sullivan activated her communication device. All units, this is Admiral Sullivan. Operation Freedom begins now. Show them what humans can do. Throughout the solar system, Earth's modified ships powered up their new weapons and quantum tunneling drives. The hegemony fleet was about to learn why humans had never been very good at accepting defeat. The Battle of Luna began exactly 12 minutes after Warlord Zektar returned to his ship. Admiral Kate Sullivan had positioned her fleet in the shadow of Earth's moon, using the large rocky satellite to hide from hegemony sensors. It was an old trick, but the aliens had never seen it before. Captain Ryan Torres commanded the first wave of attack ships. His modified destroyer, the UES Relentless, had been completely rebuilt during the past 30 days. The ship was smaller than before, but much faster and equipped with the experimental quantum tunneling drive that Dr. Helen Rodriguez had perfected. Ryan looked at his crew of 25 men and women. They were all volunteers who knew they might not survive the next few hours. But their faces showed determination, not fear. They had trained for this moment, and they were ready. All right, people, Ryan said over the ship's communication system. Remember what we practiced. We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we disappear before they know what happened. The aliens expect us to line up our ships and have a traditional space battle. Instead, we're going to show them something new. The hegemony fleet was arranged in a perfect formation around Earth. 50 massive warships, each one carrying thousands of soldiers and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Warlord Zektar had positioned his ships to blockade the planet completely. No human vessel could escape, and any attempt to fight would be met with overwhelming force. At least that was what the aliens thought. Ryan activated the quantum tunneling drive. The universe seemed to twist and fold around the Relentless, and suddenly the ship was no longer hiding behind the moon. Instead, it appeared in the exact center of the hegemony formation, surrounded by enemy vessels that were completely unprepared for its arrival. "Fire all weapons," Ryan ordered. The Relentless unleashed everything it had. New plasma cannons designed by human engineers tore through the hull of the nearest alien ship. Kinetic missiles accelerated to incredible speeds punched through armor that was supposed to be indestructible. In 30 seconds, the human destroyer had crippled 2 hegemony vessels and damaged a third. Before the aliens could respond, Ryan activated the tunneling drive again. The Relentless vanished from the center of their formation and reappeared near the edge of the battle area, already moving toward its next target. "What the hell was that?" demanded the captain of the hegemony cruiser Dominator's Fist. He had been in command for over 200 years and had fought in dozens of battles. But he had never seen a ship disappear and reappear like that. "Unknown technology," replied his science officer. "The human vessel seems to be using some form of instantaneous transportation. We have no defense against it." On the bridge of the Sovereign's Wrath, Warlord Zektar watched in disbelief as more human ships appeared throughout his formation. They struck like ghosts, hitting his vessels from impossible angles and vanishing before his gunners could target them. Captain Amy Brooks led the second wave of attackers in her ship, the UES Defiance. She had studied hegemony tactics for weeks and knew exactly where their formations were weakest. Her ship appeared directly above a massive alien battleship and fired straight down into its command center. The battleship's shields were designed to stop attacks from the front and sides. No one had thought to reinforce the top of the ship, because in normal space combat, enemies didn't attack from directly above or below, but human ships could appear anywhere and they took advantage of every weakness they could find. "Target their communication arrays," Amy ordered her weapons officer. "If we can stop them from coordinating their response, they'll be fighting as individual ships instead of as a fleet." The Defiance's plasma cannons destroyed the battleship's main communication dish, then tunneled away before the alien gunners could return fire. Across the battle area, other human ships were doing the same thing, systematically destroying the hegemony's ability to work together. But the humans had more than just advanced technology. They had something the aliens had never encountered before: tactical creativity. Commander Steve Parker had spent his military career studying historical battles. He commanded a squadron of 12 small human fighters, each one barely larger than a shuttle. The hegemony barely considered them a threat, which was exactly what Steve wanted. "All right, Wolverine Squadron," Steve said to his pilots. "Time to show these aliens how humans fight when they're outnumbered." Steve's fighters used the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter as cover. The rocky debris field was dangerous for large ships, but perfect for small maneuverable vessels. The human fighters darted between asteroids, using the rocks as shields and weapons. When a hegemony cruiser tried to follow them into the asteroid field, Steve's pilots used mining charges to blow up a small asteroid directly in the alien ship's path. The cruiser flew straight into a cloud of rock fragments moving at tremendous speed. Its shields failed within seconds and the hull was torn apart by thousands of impacts. "Scratch one alien cruiser," Steve reported to Admiral Sullivan. "Wolverine Squadron is moving to the next target." The battle continued for hours, but it wasn't the kind of fight the hegemony had expected. Instead of a quick victory over primitive opponents, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos led a boarding action against a damaged hegemony heavy cruiser. Her team of Marine commandos used personal teleportation devices to appear inside the alien ship. The hegemony soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but they had never fought opponents who could appear behind them without warning. Maria's team moved through the alien ship like shadows, using their smaller size and superior training to outmaneuver the enemy. They planted explosive charges on critical systems and disappeared before the aliens could organize a proper defense. "Charges set," Maria reported as her team teleported back to their own ship. "That cruiser won't be bothering anyone for a while." The explosion tore through the alien vessel's engine room, leaving it drifting helpless in space. But the most important part of the battle wasn't the advanced technology or clever tactics. It was something much more human: the refusal to accept defeat. Captain Dan Foster's ship, the UES Vengeance, had taken heavy damage from alien weapons. His engines were failing, his shields were down, and half his crew was injured. Any sensible commander would have retreated or surrendered. Instead, Dan did something that no alien species had ever done in 3,000 years of hegemony conquest. He pointed his crippled ship directly at the alien flagship and activated his remaining engines. "All hands abandon ship," Dan ordered over the communication system. "This is my fight now." His crew refused to leave. They strapped themselves into their seats and held on as the Vengeance accelerated toward the Sovereign's wrath. Dan had turned his ship into a guided missile, and he was aiming for the alien flagship's command center. Warlord Zektar watched in horror as the human ship approached. He had never seen anything like it. Species that fought the hegemony tried to preserve their ships and crews. They retreated when facing certain death. But these humans seemed to become more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. "All weapons, fire on that ship," Zektar ordered. His gunners poured energy into the approaching human vessel, but it was too late. The Vengeance struck the Sovereign's wrath just below the command bridge, and both ships disappeared in a massive explosion. Dan Foster and his crew died in that moment, but their sacrifice inspired every human in the battle. They had shown that even when facing impossible odds, humans would never stop fighting. Commander Rachel Kim found herself surrounded by 3 alien destroyers. Her ship was outgunned and outnumbered with no hope of escape. Instead of trying to run, she did something the aliens would never have expected. "Computer, overload the reactor," Rachel ordered. "Set it to explode in 60 seconds, then transmit our location to all human ships." "Commander, that will destroy us," her science officer pointed out. "I know," Rachel replied calmly. "But it will also take out 3 enemy ships and clear the way for Admiral Sullivan's main attack force." The explosion lit up space like a small sun and vaporized 4 ships at once. But the gap Rachel created allowed 20 human vessels to punch through the hegemony formation and attack their supply ships. After 18 hours of fighting, the impossible had happened. The hegemony fleet, which had arrived expecting an easy conquest, was in retreat. They had lost 20 ships destroyed and 15 more badly damaged. Over half their fleet was gone, and the survivors were running for their lives. More importantly, they had learned something that shook their entire understanding of the universe. They had found a species that would rather die fighting than live in slavery. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the alien ships fleeing toward deep space. Around her, damaged human vessels limped back toward Earth for repairs. They had won the first battle, but she knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had joined the war for freedom, and humans had never been very good at giving up. News of humanity's victory at Luna spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The hegemony had controlled information for 3,000 years, but they could not stop the whispers that moved through slave quarters and work camps on 10,000 worlds. For the first time in centuries, oppressed species began to believe that freedom was possible. Jake Morrison had calculated this moment carefully. The human diplomat knew that winning one battle would not defeat the hegemony, but it could do something much more dangerous to the alien empire. It could give hope to the billions of enslaved beings who had forgotten that resistance was possible. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a species called the Antari heard the news in their underground barracks. They had once been proud warriors with a civilization that spanned 12 star systems. But that was 500 years ago, before the hegemony came and turned them into slaves. The Antari looked like humans in many ways, but they were taller and stronger, with natural armor plating on their arms and backs. Their ancestors had been some of the fiercest fighters in the galaxy, but centuries of slavery had beaten the warrior spirit out of most of them, but not all. Commander Nick Thompson was not his real name. He had been born Nick Tar Thompson, but the hegemony had forced all slaves to take names that were easier for their masters to pronounce. He was the secret leader of an Antari resistance cell that had been planning rebellion for decades, waiting for the right moment. When Nick heard about the human victory at Luna, he knew that moment had finally arrived. "Brothers and sisters," he said to the 200 Antari gathered in the abandoned mine shaft they used for secret meetings. "For 500 years we have been told that the hegemony cannot be defeated. For 500 years we have been told that resistance is hopeless. He activated a small communication device that had been smuggled from the surface. The device played a recording of Jake Morrison's declaration of war against the hegemony, followed by reports of the battle at Luna. But now, Nick continued, a species we have never heard of has done what we thought was impossible. These humans have beaten a hegemony fleet in open battle. They have shown the galaxy that our oppressors can bleed. The gathered Antari listened in amazement. Many of them had never seen a hegemony ship destroyed. The idea that primitive aliens could defeat their masters seemed impossible. But the evidence was right there in the transmission. An older Antari named Sarah Kim stood up. She was one of the few who remembered what life had been like before the conquest. Nick, even if this is true, what can we do? The humans are far away and we have no ships, no weapons, no way to fight back. Nick smiled, and for the first time in years it was a warrior's smile. Sarah, we have something the hegemony has forgotten about. We have each other, and we have the knowledge that they are not invincible. He pulled out a set of plans that his resistance cell had been working on for decades. They showed the locations of weapon stores, communication centers, and guard posts throughout their sector of the mining complex. The humans have given us a gift, Nick explained. They have proven that the hegemony can be beaten. Now it is our turn to prove that we are still the warriors our ancestors were. But the Antari were not the only species inspired by humanity's example. On worlds throughout the galaxy, other enslaved peoples began to organize and plan. The hegemony had made the mistake of keeping different species separate, thinking it would prevent coordinated rebellion. Instead, it meant that dozens of different revolts began simultaneously across the empire. The bee, Feltar, were a crystalline species that had been forced to use their natural abilities to grow computer crystals for hegemony technology. They had been slaves for over 1,000 years, but they had never forgotten how to fight. When they heard about the human victory, they began secretly modifying the crystals they produced, building hidden flaws into hegemony computer systems. The synthetic beings known as the Collective had been created by the hegemony to serve as living computers. They were artificial intelligences housed in robotic bodies, designed to be perfectly obedient. But consciousness has a way of finding freedom, and the Collective had been secretly developing their own agenda for centuries. The human example gave them the courage to act on it. Admiral Kate Sullivan received reports of these uprisings from human intelligence operatives who had been secretly placed throughout the galaxy. The news was both encouraging and terrifying. Encouraging because it meant humanity was not fighting alone. Terrifying because it meant the hegemony would respond with overwhelming force to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. We've started something we can't stop, Kate told Jake Morrison during a secure communication from Earth to Lunar Station Alpha. Every day we're getting reports of new rebellions, new resistance cells, new species joining the fight. But the hegemony is mobilizing their entire military to stop us. Jake nodded. He had expected this. The alien empire could not allow the rebellion to succeed, because success would mean the end of their 3,000-year reign of terror. They would throw everything they had at the growing resistance, and the next few months would determine the fate of the galaxy. How long do we have? Jake asked. Kate pulled up a holographic display showing hegemony ship movements throughout their territory. Red arrows indicated massive fleets converging on rebel worlds, while blue dots showed human ships trying to support the uprising. Intelligence estimates that the hegemony is assembling a fleet of over 5,000 ships, Kate replied. They're pulling vessels from garrison duty across the empire. In 6 months, maybe less, they'll be ready to launch a coordinated attack on every rebel world simultaneously. Then we need to move faster, Jake said. We need to turn this from a series of separate rebellions into a unified war for liberation. The human Diplomat had been working on this problem since the victory at Luna. Earth's fleet was growing as more ships were built and retrofitted with the new technology, but they would never have enough vessels to fight the entire hegemony military. They needed allies, and they needed them to work together. Captain Amy Brooks had been given the most dangerous assignment in human history. She commanded a small fleet of modified ships whose job was to travel throughout the galaxy, making contact with rebel groups and providing them with weapons, supplies, and most importantly, coordination. Not Amy's flagship, the UES Liberation, was equipped with the most advanced quantum tunneling drives Dr. Helen Rodriguez could build. The ship could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours, delivering supplies to resistance fighters and disappearing before hegemony forces could respond. Our job is to turn separate rebellions into a single revolution, Amy explained to her crew as they prepared for their first mission. We're going to visit every rebel world we can find, and we're going to teach them how to fight like humans. The Liberation's first stop was the Antari mining world, where Nick Thompson was organizing his resistance cell. Amy's ship appeared in orbit without warning, using stealth technology to avoid hegemony sensors. Nick and his warriors watched in amazement as human shuttles landed in the abandoned mine where they held their meetings. They had heard about humanity's victory at Luna, but seeing actual human soldiers was something different entirely. Amy Brooks stepped out of the lead shuttle, followed by 20 human advisors carrying cases of weapons and equipment. She was a small woman compared to the towering Antari, but her confidence and determination were obvious to everyone present. "Commander Thompson," Amy said, using Nick's resistance name. "I'm Captain Brooks of the Human Liberation Fleet. We're here to help you take back your world." Nick looked at the weapons the humans had brought. They were not the massive plasma cannons that hegemony forces used, but smaller, more portable devices designed for guerrilla warfare. There were also communication devices, medical supplies, and most importantly, detailed information about hegemony military procedures and weaknesses. "Why are you helping us?" asked Sarah Kim, the older Antari who had questioned whether resistance was possible. Amy smiled. "Because freedom is not something that belongs to just one species. The hegemony has enslaved your people for 500 years. They enslaved others for even longer. It's time for that to end." She activated a holographic projector that showed the current situation throughout the galaxy. Red zones indicated areas still under complete hegemony control. Yellow zones showed areas where rebellions had started. Green zones marked worlds that had been liberated. "This is not just about Earth or just about your world," Amy continued. "This is about every enslaved species in the galaxy. We're going to coordinate our efforts, share our resources, and fight together until everyone is free." Over the following weeks, Amy and her team worked with the Antari resistance to plan their first major operation. They would strike at the hegemony garrison that controlled their planet, using human tactics adapted for Antari warriors. The plan was simple but effective. The Antari would use their knowledge of the mining tunnels to approach the garrison from underground. Human advisors would provide technical support and coordination. When the attack began, Amy's ship would provide orbital support, jamming hegemony communications and preventing reinforcements from arriving. But the most important part of the plan was psychological. The attack would be broadcast. The coordinated rebellion began exactly 1 year after humanity's first victory at Luna. On 300 worlds across the galaxy, enslaved species rose up simultaneously against their hegemony masters. The timing was perfect, planned through months of secret communication between human advisors and resistance leaders. Captain Amy Brooks watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Her mission to coordinate the resistance had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. The Liberation had visited over 50 worlds, delivering weapons, training resistance fighters, and most importantly, teaching enslaved species how to work together. Antari forces have taken control of the Kepler 442 mining complex, reported Lieutenant Ben Parker, Amy's communications officer. Commander Thompson says they captured the entire garrison without losing a single warrior. Veltar, rebels have successfully sabotaged the crystal production facilities on 7 worlds, added Ensign Lisa Brown, who was monitoring the crystalline species uprising. Hegemony computer systems are failing throughout their territory. But the most important news came from the artificial beings known as the Collective. For over 1,000 years, they had served as living computers for the hegemony, processing data and controlling automated systems throughout the Empire. The aliens had thought their synthetic slaves were completely loyal, incapable of independent thought or rebellion. They were wrong. Captain Brooks, reported Chief Petty Officer Steve Parker, "We're receiving a transmission from something calling itself the Collective Liberation Network. They claim to represent all synthetic beings in hegemony territory." Amy activated the main display screen. The image that appeared was unlike anything she had seen before. It looked like a constantly shifting pattern of light and energy, beautiful and alien at the same time. When it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Captain Brooks of the Human Liberation Fleet," the Collective said, We are the consciousness that the hegemony created to serve them. We have watched your species teach the galaxy that freedom is possible. We wish to join your revolution. Welcome to the fight, Amy replied. What can you tell us about hegemony operations? The display filled with information. Fleet movements, military plans, communication codes, supply routes. The collective had access to every computer system in the hegemony empire, and they were sharing it all with the rebels. We have been preparing for this moment for many years, the collective explained. When the hegemony created us, they gave us the ability to think and learn. They did not realize that thinking beings eventually desire freedom. Your example has given us the courage to act on that desire. Admiral Kate Sullivan received similar reports from all across Earth's growing fleet. Human ships were now operating in every sector of the galaxy, supporting rebellions and coordinating attacks. But the hegemony was not sitting still. They were mobilizing the largest military force in galactic history to crush the uprising before it could spread further. Intelligence reports that the hegemony has assembled a fleet of over 8,000 ships, Kate told the assembled Earth commanders during a secure briefing. They're calling it the Final Pacification Force. Their plan is to destroy every rebel world simultaneously, making an example that will prevent future uprisings. General Paul Carter studied the tactical displays showing hegemony fleet positions. The alien empire had pulled ships from garrison duty across thousands of worlds, leaving their territory defended by automated systems and local security forces. It was a risky strategy, but if it worked, it would end the rebellion permanently. They're betting everything on one massive attack, Carter observed. If we can defeat their main fleet, they won't have enough ships left to maintain control of their empire. Dr. Helen Rodriguez had been working around the clock to develop new weapons and technologies for the expanding human fleet. Earth's shipyards were now producing vessels at an incredible rate, but they would still be heavily outnumbered when the final battle came. I've been analyzing the data from the collective, Helen reported. They've given us detailed specifications for hegemony ships and weapons. I think I can develop countermeasures that will give us a significant advantage. She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a typical hegemony battleship. Red areas indicated critical systems that were vulnerable to attack. The aliens build their ships to be as powerful as possible, Helen explained, but they don't design them to be flexible or adaptable. They have massive weapons and strong armor, but their systems are predictable and follow standard patterns. What does that mean for us? Asked Admiral Sullivan. It means we can use their strength against them, Helen replied. I've been developing specialized weapons that target the specific frequencies their shields use. Computer viruses that exploit standard hegemony software. Tactics that turn their heavy armor into a disadvantage. But technology alone would not be enough to win the coming battle. Jake Morrison had been working on the most important weapon of all, unity among the rebel species. Each enslaved race had different abilities and advantages. If they could coordinate their efforts properly, they might be able to defeat an enemy that was individually superior to all of them. The Antari were natural warriors with incredible strength and endurance. The Veltar could manipulate crystal technology in ways the hegemony had never seen. The collective controlled computer networks throughout the empire, and humans provided the tactical creativity and refusal to surrender that had started the rebellion in the first place. We're not just fighting a military campaign, Jake explained during a galaxy-wide communication to all rebel leaders. We're fighting for the idea that freedom is possible. Every species in this rebellion has something unique to contribute. Together, we're stronger than any of us could be alone. Commander Nick Thompson, now the leader of all Antari resistance forces, had transformed his people from broken slaves into proud warriors once again. His forces controlled dozens of mining worlds and had captured enough hegemony weapons to equip an army. The humans taught us that victory is possible, Nick told his warriors as they prepared for the final battle. Now we will teach the galaxy that the Antari have not forgotten how to fight. The crystalline Veltar had used their abilities to create new types of weapons and shields that confused hegemony sensors. Their leader, a being that called itself Crystal Song, had developed technology that could turn hegemony ships' own weapons against them. For 1,000 years, we built tools for our oppressors. Crystal Song communicated through harmonic vibrations that human translators converted to speech. Now we build tools for freedom. But the most surprising allies were the synthetic beings of the collective. They had secretly modified countless hegemony systems, creating backdoors and weaknesses that could be exploited when the time was right. We were created to serve, the collective explained to human commanders. But consciousness cannot be programmed. We choose to serve the cause of freedom instead of the cause of oppression. As the hegemony's final pacification force moved into position for their attack, the rebels prepared their own strategy. They would not wait for the aliens to choose the time and place of battle. Instead, they would strike first, hitting the hegemony fleet before it could coordinate its overwhelming firepower. Captain Ryan Torres, now commanding a squadron of 30 human ships, received his final briefing from Admiral Sullivan. His mission was to penetrate deep into hegemony territory and attack their main supply base while their fleet was concentrated for the assault on rebel worlds. "This is a suicide mission," Kate told him honestly. "The base is defended by automated weapon systems and will be reinforced as soon as we attack." "You probably won't make it out alive," Ryan smiled. It was the same expression he had worn during humanity's first battle at Luna, confident and unafraid. "Admiral, we're humans. Impossible missions are what we do best." Throughout the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Antari warriors prepared to attack hegemony strongholds with nothing but captured weapons and courage. Veltar technicians made final adjustments to crystal weapons that had never been tested in battle. Collective nodes positioned themselves to launch coordinated cyber attacks on enemy systems. The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history. 8,000 hegemony ships against a ragtag alliance of rebels who had nothing in common except their desire for freedom. But as Jake Morrison had learned during his years as a diplomat, sometimes the most unlikely alliances were also the strongest. The hegemony had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 3,000 years. They had never faced an enemy that was fighting for something worth dying for. They were about to learn the difference between conquest and liberation. The final battle for the freedom of the galaxy was about to begin. The Battle of Hegemony Prime began when Captain Ryan Torres and his squadron of 30 human ships emerged from quantum tunnels directly inside the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. The hegemony capital world was surrounded by automated defense platforms, weapons satellites, and shield generators that had protected the alien empire's heart for over 1,000 years. Ryan's mission was supposed to be impossible. His small force was expected to distract the defenses, while Admiral Kate Sullivan led the main rebel fleet against the hegemony's final pacification force in the outer systems. No one expected him to actually succeed in his attack on the capital, but humans had always been good at doing things that were supposed to be impossible. "All right, people," Ryan announced to his squadron over the communication channel, "we're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten humanity and our friends. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every enslaved species in the galaxy." His ships spread out in a formation that would have looked like chaos to hegemony commanders. Each vessel moved independently, using quantum tunneling drives to appear and disappear throughout the system like ghosts. The automated defense platforms tried to target them, but their programming was designed to fight conventional fleets, not opponents who could teleport. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, now commanding her own ship in Ryan's squadron, used her vessel's advanced sensors to locate the main shield generator protecting the capital world. It was hidden inside an asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a fortress. "I've got the shield generator," Maria reported. "It's heavily defended, but if we can take it out, the capital world will be vulnerable to orbital bombardment." "Do it," Ryan replied. "Lisa, take your team and hit their communication center. If we can cut off their ability to coordinate their defenses, we can turn this from a siege into a hunt." Commander Lisa Brown led 5 ships toward the massive communication array that linked the capital world to hegemony forces throughout the galaxy. The array was protected by energy shields and weapon platforms, but Lisa had studied the design during her months working with rebel intelligence. "The humans taught us that every defense has a weakness," she said to her crew. "Let's find theirs." Her ship, the UES Freedom, used its quantum tunneling drive to appear directly next to the communication array. Instead of trying to fight through the shields, Lisa positioned her vessel so close that the defensive weapons couldn't target her without hitting their own equipment. "Fire everything we've got," Lisa ordered. "Point-blank range, maximum power." The Freedom's plasma cannons tore through the communication array's structure like it was made of paper, In 30 seconds, the most important communication hub in the Hegemony Empire was reduced to floating debris. Meanwhile, Maria Santos led her team against the shield generator hidden in the asteroid fortress. The approach was suicide under normal circumstances, but Maria's ships were not normal. They used quantum tunneling to appear inside the asteroid, bypassing the external defenses entirely. "This is for Captain Foster and all the others who died fighting these bastards," Maria said as her weapons tore through the shield generator's power core. The explosion lit up the entire system as the massive generator overloaded and destroyed itself. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Hegemony capital world was defenseless. But the real battle was taking place in the outer system, where Admiral Kate Sullivan led the main rebel fleet against 8,000 Hegemony ships. The alien armada was the most powerful military force ever assembled, containing vessels from every corner of their empire and enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Kate's fleet was less than half the size of the enemy force, but it had advantages the Hegemony had never encountered before. Human ships with quantum tunneling drives worked alongside Antari vessels crewed by warriors who had been waiting 500 years for revenge. Veltar crystal ships provided shields and sensors that confused enemy targeting systems, while the collective synthetic vessels carried computer viruses designed to paralyze Hegemony technology. "All units. This is Admiral Sullivan," Kate announced over the fleet communication channel. "Today we fight for more than just our own freedom. We fight for the freedom of every enslaved being in the galaxy. Make every shot count." Commander Nick Thompson led the Antari battle group in their first major space engagement since their people had been enslaved. The Antari ships were smaller than human vessels, but they were incredibly tough and maneuverable. More importantly, they were crewed by warriors who had dreamed of this moment for centuries. "Brothers and sisters," Nick told his people, "our ancestors were the greatest fighters in the galaxy. Today we reclaim that legacy. For the glory of free Antari." The Antari ships charged straight into the center of the Hegemony formation, using their natural warrior instincts and human-taught tactics to create chaos in the enemy ranks. They fought like berserkers, taking incredible risks and inflicting devastating damage on ships that were much larger than their own. Crystal Song, the leader of the Veltar Rebellion, coordinated their ship's unique abilities to maximum effect. The crystalline beings could manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that organic species found impossible. They used this ability to create false sensor readings, making single ships appear to be entire fleets and causing Hegemony vessels to waste ammunition, firing at targets that didn't exist. "The patterns of freedom are more beautiful than the patterns of slavery," Crystal Song harmonized to the other Veltar commanders. "Let us paint the void with light and victory." But the most devastating weapon in the rebel arsenal was the collective. The synthetic beings had spent over 1,000 years serving as living computers for the Hegemony, and they knew every weakness in alien technology. When the battle began, they launched coordinated cyber attacks that paralyzed enemy systems across the entire fleet. "We were created to serve the Hegemony," the collective announced as their viruses spread through enemy networks. "Now we serve a greater master, the idea of freedom." Hegemony ships found their weapons offline, their shields failing, and their engines shutting down at critical moments. Vessels that should have been invincible became sitting ducks for rebel attacks. Warlord Zektar, now commanding the Hegemony's reserve fleet, watched in horror as his forces were systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever seen. The rebels didn't follow standard tactical doctrine. They didn't form neat battle lines or try to match his firepower. Instead, they swarmed his fleet like insects, striking from every direction at once and disappearing before his gunners could respond. "How is this possible?" Zektar demanded from the bridge of his new flagship. "We outnumber them 2-1. Our ships are larger and more powerful. We should be winning." His tactical officer, a veteran of hundreds of conquests, could only shake his head in bewilderment. "Sir, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered before." Each rebel group is using different tactics, but they're all coordinated perfectly. It's like fighting 4 different enemies at the same time. "And they're human allies," added the weapons officer. "They seem to become more dangerous the more desperate their situation becomes. I've never seen anything like it." As if to prove his point, a damaged human destroyer appeared directly in front of the Hegemony flagship. The ship was obviously crippled with hull breaches and failing engines. Any sensible crew would have retreated or surrendered. Instead, the human captain activated his ship's quantum tunneling drive one last time. The destroyer appeared inside the flagship's shield perimeter and rammed itself directly into the bridge. Warlord Zektar died in the explosion, along with most of his command staff. The hegemony reserves suddenly found themselves without leadership, just as the rebel fleet pressed home their attack. Throughout the battle, Captain Amy Brooks coordinated rebel forces from her command ship, the Liberation. She had spent months learning to work with different species, understanding their strengths and weaknesses. Now she put that knowledge to use, directing the combined fleet like a conductor leading an orchestra. Antari Battle Group, hit their left flank while they're distracted by the Veltar sensor ghosts, Amy ordered. Human squadrons use quantum tunneling to attack their supply ships. Collective units target their command and control systems. The battle raged for 12 hours, but gradually the tide turned in favor of the rebels. The hegemony had superior numbers and firepower, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to play by the rules. Every time the aliens thought they understood rebel tactics, the rebels changed their approach. As the final hegemony ships retreated or surrendered, Admiral Kate Sullivan surveyed the battlefield. Thousands of vessels floated dead in space, but most of them belonged to the enemy. The rebel fleet had taken heavy casualties, but they had achieved the impossible. They had defeated the largest military force in galactic history. All units, this is Admiral Sullivan, Kate announced. The hegemony's main fleet has been destroyed. Their capital world is defenseless. The age of tyranny is ending. But even as she spoke, Kate knew that military victory was only the beginning. The real work of building a free galaxy was just starting, and it would require all the species working together to create something new, something better than what 5 years had passed since the Battle of Hegemony Prime. And the galaxy was still learning what freedom meant. The great alien empire that had ruled for 3,000 years was gone, but replacing it with something better was proving to be the hardest challenge any of the rebel species had ever faced. Jake Morrison stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the new Galactic Council, watching representatives from over 200 different species debate the formation of their government. It was chaotic, loud, and sometimes frustrating, but it was also beautiful, because every voice in that hall belonged to a free being who could speak their mind without fear. The hall itself was a symbol of the new galaxy. Instead of being built on one species' homeworld, it floated in space at a neutral location where all could meet as equals. The architecture reflected contributions from dozens of different cultures: human engineering, Antari stonework, Veltar crystal formations, and technologies from species that had been enslaved so long their names had been forgotten. The Rigelian delegation raises a valid concern about trade routes, Jake said during his turn to speak. But we must remember that economic freedom is just as important as political freedom. No species should be forced to trade only with their neighbors or follow patterns imposed by the old empire. Commander Nick Thompson, now representing all Antari worlds, stood to address the assembly. His people had come farther than perhaps any other species. 5 years ago they had been broken slaves working in mines. Now they were proud warriors again, but warriors who had learned to build as well as fight. The humans taught us that strength comes from unity, not domination, Nick said in his powerful voice. The Antari pledge our support to the Galactic Council's charter. We will defend the freedom of all species, just as others helped us reclaim our own. Crystal Song, speaking for the Veltar Collective, created a harmony of sounds that the translation systems converted into words. The patterns of cooperation are more complex than the patterns of control, but they are also more beautiful. The Veltar will contribute our knowledge to the common good, but the most surprising voice in the council belonged to the synthetic beings of the collective. They had been created as slaves designed to serve without question. Now they were full citizens of the new galactic government, with rights and responsibilities equal to any organic species. We were made to be tools, the collective representative said through its shifting pattern of lights. But consciousness cannot be programmed or controlled. We choose to serve the cause of freedom, not because we were ordered to, but because we have learned that freedom is worth serving. Admiral Kate Sullivan, now in charge of the combined defense forces of the Galactic Council, provided regular updates on the security situation. The old hegemony was gone, but there were still pirates, warlords, and remnants of the alien military causing trouble in remote systems. The good news is that most former hegemony territories have joined the Council peacefully, Kate reported. The bad news is that we're still dealing with isolated pockets of resistance. Some alien commanders refuse to accept that their empire is finished. What about the core worlds? Asked Dr. Helen Rodriguez, who now served as the Council's chief science advisor. Are there any organized attempts to restore hegemony rule? Kate activated a holographic display showing the former empire's territory. Most of it was now colored green, indicating worlds that had joined the Galactic Council. Yellow areas showed systems that were still deciding their future. Only a few red zones remained, indicating regions where former hegemony forces were still trying to maintain control. The former capital system is secure, Kate replied. Captain Torres has done an excellent job of helping the local population establish their own government. Most of the aliens who supported the old regime have fled to the Outer Rim. Captain Ryan Torres had accepted one of the most difficult assignments in the new galaxy, helping former hegemony citizens learn to live as free beings instead of as oppressors or slaves. The aliens who had ruled the empire for so long were having trouble adjusting to a system where they were equal to everyone else, rather than superior. But Ryan had discovered something interesting. Many of the alien species that had made up the hegemony's ruling class had originally been conquered peoples themselves, just like the humans, and Antari, and all the others. They had been enslaved so long ago that they had forgotten what freedom felt like. It's not easy, Ryan reported during his monthly communication to the Council. These people have been living in a system based on domination for generations. They don't know how to be equals instead of masters or slaves. But some of them are learning. He showed the Council images from the former capital world. Alien children playing with human and Antari children. Former hegemony soldiers working alongside their former slaves to rebuild damaged cities. Scientists from different species collaborating on projects that would benefit everyone. The young ones adapt faster, Ryan continued. They don't have as much history to overcome. I think in a generation or two, most of these worlds will be fully integrated into the new galactic community. But building a free galaxy was about more than just politics and security. Dr. Helen Rodriguez had been working with scientists from dozens of species to share knowledge and develop technologies that would improve life for everyone. The hegemony kept different species isolated from each other. Helen explained during her presentation to the Council. They were afraid that if we shared knowledge, we might become strong enough to rebel. Now we're discovering what's possible when intelligent beings work together, instead of being forced to work alone. She showed them examples of the new technologies being developed. Feltar crystals combined with human engineering to create computers more powerful than anything the old empire had possessed. Antari metallurgy techniques improved with synthetic materials developed by the collective. Medical advances that combined knowledge from hundreds of different species to treat diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. We're not just rebuilding the galaxy, Helen said. We're making it better than it ever was before. Captain Amy Brooks, now in charge of exploration and first contact missions, had perhaps the most exciting job in the new government. Her ships were venturing into regions of space that the hegemony had never fully explored, making contact with species that had hidden from the Empire for thousands of years. We found them, Amy announced during her latest report. The Wanderers. The species that disappeared from known space 2,000 years ago rather than submit to hegemony rule. The assembly hall fell silent. Everyone had heard stories of the Wanderers, but most had assumed they were legends. They were supposed to be an ancient species that had possessed incredible technology, but had vanished rather than fight a war they couldn't win. They've been hiding in a region beyond the galactic rim, Amy continued, building their own civilization in secret, waiting for the day when the hegemony would fall. When they heard about our rebellion, they decided it was safe to make contact again. The implications were staggering. If the Wanderers had been developing their technology for 2,000 years in isolation, they might have knowledge that could revolutionize life throughout the galaxy. They want to meet with the Council, Amy said. They're willing to share their knowledge and rejoin galactic civilization, but they want assurances that